Hello, friends. It is I, host Eric, and tonight I'm going to make a video right now, in fact, called INFJ Cross-Bearing. What am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about the difficulty of being one of these unusual knowledge types that has both a great deal of knowledge and effectiveness in one interface function, and also a knowledge of their own lack of effectiveness in the other uh, interface function. So, what do I mean by that? Well, I've got a few examples that occurred today that remind me of how challenging it must be to be an INFJ. So, an INFJ has knowledge of the immediate object of their attention. That's to say, whatever is happening right now or is something in front of them that needs to be known about. They have knowledge of the relevant parties, everybody who might be involved in the thing that's the object of their attention right now, and how they might feel about this given thing or how they might interact with it. They have knowledge about their own capacity to deal with this thing in front of them right now, whatever it is, and they have knowledge that given choices that they end up taking regarding this thing are going to lead to different kinds of impacts, and they know those choices and stuff and those paths and what kind of impacts they're likely to have before they make a decision. Well, that seems all relevant, simple enough. I mean, it seems reasonable enough, right, Eric? You know, it is reasonable, of course. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this, but other factors to consider here are offense, defense. So the INFJ is an FE tool user, but with FE you can either be playing offense, so to speak, or playing defense. What does that mean? Well, it is to say you can either be trying to actively score points for being cool, for accomplishing things, for whatever, or you can be relying on taking advantage of the sort of passive ability to get good perceptions from people by simply being a good listener or listening well and showing interest in what they're saying or whatever. So I would be, you would say by this dichotomy here, be somebody who plays a lot of FE offense. I'm making myself out there a lot so that I can get feedback. I'm not so worried about getting negative FE, and I don't have a lot of faith in the slow and certain and more nuanced understanding of FE that would say you can best attain FE by asking lots of questions and getting everybody to like you for being interested in them. So, and the other factor is harmony. People talk about harmony being an absolute value of FE or something. It's not an absolute value of FE, but it is a relevant consideration. What I mean here is that an INFJ understands that harmony on kind of a long-term level and ability to function well in a given environment and with a given set of people or whatever is contingent upon, from their perspective, the status is staying clean. So, depending on their particular experience, they may be more or less skittish about the status is staying clean. When I say the status is staying clean, I mean they understand how if there's boundary crossing that's being repeated and not addressed, even though it's communicated, or about which, say, an INFJ has to communicate a great deal of blunt, hard to communicate information from a sort of FE perspective, that's ultimately going to be the sustainability of the relationships in their lives are going to be, it's going to be contingent somewhat on their ability to avoid harmony destroying instances that may or may be not be nearly as impactful as they are, but that INFJs are accustomed to being largely impactful because, unlike them, other people are constantly being surprised and having strong emotional reactions to the way that still other people act. All right, and then there's the issue of messiness where. So, when I'm talking about caring a lot about statuses, I'm saying INFJs are extremely tidy people on the metaphysical plane. They're about as tidy as you can get. They won't let a bad status that's been stated by somebody slide and be pushed under the rug. If somebody's expressed a status about them that they see as either FE offense, in other words, they're trying to position me negatively to kind of gain hierarchy or something, or they see it as FE offense in the sense that rather than hierarchy, perhaps they're just they're a rival for a specific outcome or something. Um, Regardless, those kind of disruptive statuses where they've been called a name or accused of being uh, bad at meow. Or I remember Rachel telling me a story of an occasion where she was eating lunch with some friends, and one of them, discussion of who would get divorced first before, I guess, before any of them were married even, came up, and one of her friends indicated, "Oh, it'll be Rachel. You know, it's Rachel. She's gonna get divorced first." That's something that Rachel carried with her enough. The injustice of feeling like having been unfairly put into a specific box for reasons that were somewhat inauthentic is a big problem for INFJ. That's what I mean by very tidy on the metaphysical field. Whereas those meaning issues are not nearly so tidy a matter for certain other types, and other things like the physical space can be much more tidy. Which brings us to the examples and the story that led to this video at all, the stories that led to it. So, first, I want to talk about the main story is the last one, the hot water heater, which is what really prompted this video. But I want to talk about the bird and the football game first. So, a couple of adventures in the life of an INFJ. My dad had been gone for like a week. He's been back now for a day or two, and he noticed today, of course he noticed, I didn't notice, and Rachel didn't notice, but we have this high window up here that's above the sliding glass doors, and it's got a big crack in it. So, my first guess was maybe it was these birds that we've seen that come up to it sometimes. They used to, I haven't seen it in a long time, but they came up to it and would like peck at it, like it's kind of got a mirrored surface on it, so maybe they thought there were other birds or something. And then I threw out that another possibility, maybe it was the earthquake. It happened during the earthquake. Well, Rachel heard this earthquake thing, but my dad didn't hear me say this. So she voiced it to him outside, said, boy, maybe it's it was the earthquake. And keep in mind, I have to backpedal a second. So, after I mentioned the birds, he didn't think that was likely. I didn't think it was particularly likely either. But he posited that it had been shot with a BB gun or a pellet gun. And, of course, the weird thing here is, number one, why would someone shoot the window with a BB gun or a pellet gun? But two, who around where we are even could have a spot that could hit that window from is like the neighbors right there maybe. But it seems unlikely that they would shoot my window with a pellet gun or a BB gun because they're just not that kind of people at all. It's like they're very polite and good neighbor-ish Chinese family. We've been next door for years. We don't have any conflict with them. There's actually, it just makes no sense at all. It would have to have been a random impulse where, it's not even conceivable that they were trying to get us to shut up or anything. It's like there's no possible motive for this. And additionally, the other thing that's weird about it is we, of course, have a BB gun or a pellet gun here in the house, in the kitchen, that is my dad uses to occasionally shoot at things like squirrel or a bird that he thinks is making too much noise or something. So my intuition says, okay, what are you saying? Are you subtly accusing us of shooting the window with a BB gun or something? With the BB gun? Of course, I don't think he was at all. But I think he was just doing what Polar does. I can't think of any obvious reason for this. So I'm going to posit a possibility that's maybe very, very low probability or doesn't make any sense intuitively. and suggest it because that possibility emerges to me from my past understanding of things. In other words, well, I know from the world that sometimes people shoot windows with BB guns and they break them. So, maybe that's what happened. Oblivious to the fact that the circumstances tell us that that's extremely unlikely. So, it was after that I had posited and Rachel had expressed sort of to, I think, echo what I was saying because she could tell my dad didn't hear, this theory of the earthquake. And he poo-pooed the theory of the earthquake appropriately, but on the grounds that, the earthquake wasn't that big. It didn't break anything else in the house and didn't really create any damage. He didn't see how it would do that. And I said, well, I agree, Dad. I think the earthquake hypothesis is unlikely to be correct. But the reason I said that was because I heard you positing that someone had shot it with a BB gun and that it was indicated because it was pitted. There was a pit someplace. So then at some point during this we realized, or I don't know if my dad ever even heard this or thought it relevant at all, but the crack's actually on the inside of this window. There's probably a two-pane thing like this. The panes are pushed together because you can feel the crack on the inside, but you can't feel it on the outside. So that kind of eliminates the BB gun hypothesis entirely unless we are shooting at the window ourselves from the inside of this room. And so, at that point I said, well, it just seems you were positing a cause that seemed extraordinarily unlikely. So I said, well, I can't think of a really good reason, but this is better than that. It just sort of slides off him as though there's no recognition of that being a meaningful thing to say. Now, of course, that's example one, the bird, where his terrible idea is presented as likely. My inadequate but less terrible NI idea is ridiculed for its bad NI. Even though it's the best of the options been set on the table. Now, at this point, what I think is what most likely happened is one of two things. Just to clarify, to finish the story of the bird. I think either I slammed the sliding glass door too hard because it gets stuck sometimes and I gotta go, and that caused it, or a large bird flew into it. It's got kind of a mirrored surface, but depending on where the sun is, I think, or where your perspective is, maybe like where the bird's flying, it looks sometimes like it's just a clear blue sky. So it's possible a larger bird crashed into it, broke it. But if that were to have happened, then it would have to be because the inside pane is tauter than the outside pane in this two-pane setup. Because otherwise, it still would have broken the outside pane first, I think. But that's where my physics knowledge is inadequate to determine what exactly we can conclude from the fact that the crack's on the inside and not the outside. Okay, so now on to the football game. Then, my dad didn't have the time right for the USC game, which is at 4:30, not at 7:30. I think it's at 4:30 actually. He's like, oh, cool, yeah, it is at 4:30. And I'm like, I'd like to come in and watch the game with you, if that's all right. And he said, well, yeah, sure, that sounds good, that's fine. I'll go get the sandwiches from the store, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to it. He's like, uh-huh. And Rachel's like, yeah, me too, yeah. He's like, of course you're welcome to come too, Rachel. Yes, you too, obviously. And Rachel's like, no, and of course, him being deaf doubles this problem.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about messy wear, right? So Rachel ends this encounter with my dad believing on some level that she had said she was worried about whether she would be allowed to come inside and watch the game with us or something, when she was really just expressing that she too is looking forward to it. Of course, the additional problem is if you were to try to clear this up, like as I've tried on many occasions in my life, if you go back later and you try to clear it up, just to be clear, Dad, earlier when meow said meow, they meant meow, 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 meow. You get these. What difference does that make with anything? So what are you talking about? What are we dealing with here? So is there a problem? No, there's no. You know what? Never mind. My bad. I tried to do that thing again where I use NI to explain to you how there was a singular status that was to be taken from that whole thing, and the one that you took from it is insane. But I should have known better by now, right? So then there's the third one. Now this one has to do with me. Rachel wanted to take a bath earlier, and she went in and discovered when she went in there that the pilot light went out again and there's no hot water. And I'm sure when she went in the bath, I haven't talked to her about this at all, but I'm sure when she went into the bathroom and discovered there was no hot water, she sighed and she's like, the pilot light's out again. Unfortunately for an INFJ, knowing that reality is not all they know. Because they also know that Eric doesn't listen very well to NI conclusions. That Eric's response, if she were to come out here and say, the pilot light's out, is, well, I'm sure it's not that. It's something else. So instead of coming out here and saying to me, the pilot light's out, she came in and said, there's not really any... I don't remember exactly how she put it, but I think I might have to wait till later because there's not a lot. I need to clean it out, and I need to wait for hot water because I don't know, maybe I used some when I was cleaning it, or she said this stuff. And I said, yeah, well, maybe it's just my dad doing laundry. And then she could also probably tell at that moment that I was annoyed at the messenger. I was in the middle of pacing back and forth, or either that or maybe just watching, maybe I was just watching cartoons. I don't remember what I was doing. But at that moment, I was annoyed at the messenger drawing my attention from whatever was in front of my face. So she just sort of like danced around it a bit until I voluntarily on my own said, well, okay, let's test this thing out. Now once I had said I need to test it, then she knows, okay, I'm halfway now to getting to him to where I was when I first tried the water in the bathroom and realized that the pilot light was out. He is soon going to agree with me that the pilot light is out, even though I could have just told him so right away. I know how that's going to go, so we have to do this little dance. So then sure enough, of course I don't believe the pilot light's out, even though I finally realized, oh, she's saying the pilot light's out. So, of course I don't just accept that reality is true. And even as I'm testing the hot water, I am expecting the whole time for the water to get hot. Because this is the other thing the INFJ does that makes it their cross to bear. She knows that I don't respect her TE at all. Because she knows that even if she didn't know about cognitive functions, she'd know that her NI is least trustworthy when it comes to her about these sort of things. So if this were an FE matter, she would take a different approach probably to communicating her knowledge about it. But because the TE matter, she knows not only can she not justify her conclusions on TE grounds, like, well, did you check the Langston bolt? Could be the Langston bolt's loose, and she's just going to be like, okay, well, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about even so. So she knows she can't justify on TE grounds. And she knows from experience probably that lack of TE knowledge has occasionally, and will sometimes cause her to make incorrect TE conclusions. So she doesn't really trust herself with what she nevertheless knows to be true, the fact that the pilot light needs to be relit. She doesn't trust me with her knowing, because she knows from plenty of experience that I have to establish it for myself, even when, she could be telling me, you should probably not walk right into that huge ball of fire. I don't hear a warrant. Fire's hot. That fire might not be. It could be cool fire. Well, and they kind of go, fine. Cool fire's blue. Good point. You know what? I am going to stay away from that fire. Later on, you have a conversation. Okay, so Eric, I just took advantage of your susceptibility to NI there, but the fact is, just because fire's blue doesn't mean it's cold, and just because fire's red doesn't mean it's hot. It was actually a trick. That was in fact cold fire, but I just didn't want you to get injured by the carbon monoxide, which builds up around the cold fire. And I knew that if I just told you all that stuff right here on the spot, that you wouldn't listen to me, so I just did it the way I did. I know I'm frustrated too. I'm frustrated at you and your lack of just awareness about the world and how sometimes you can't fight what is. Anyway, I now restarted the water heater, and my dad looked over my shoulder as I was doing it, which is on me because I went in there and said the pilot light needs to be relit. And the reason I did that is mostly because the last time we did it, he successfully did it, and I need to do something twice until I feel confident about really doing it, generally. And now, next time the pilot light goes out, I'll just do it myself. But it's not the kind that you just light with a lighter. You have to has an electronic starter, and the chamber in which is all enclosed, and you can't get to it at all. So I wasn't sure how that one worked, and the instructions were rather complicated, but now I know how it works, so it's pretty straightforward. Okay, thanks for watching. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese and INFJs. I feel you, dogs. I feel you. I'd rather not know. That way I just bumble my way through life without all that neuroses. It goes along with having to manage all this shit. The more you know, the more you're responsible for dealing with, right? That's the challenge.